Thank you for joining us on our basically day 5 of our technical takeoff. We've had 4 amazing days, about 40 sessions of deep technical content. Today, we're going to have our open office hours, ask Microsoft anything about Windows 11, about Windows 365, about Intune, anything we've talked about in the last 4 days, anything that's on your mind, you've got the right people here. And besides, for those of us here, we've got a bunch of people behind us answering questions as well on the tech community page. So thanks so much for all your support. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joe Lurie. I am on our Intune engineering team. I'm a product manager. Pretty general knowledge on Intune, on Windows 11, Windows 365. I am here with an amazing cast of people. I'm going to start with Aria. I'm going to ask her, because she's next on the way I see the faces. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself, what she does at Microsoft, and then hand the baton over to Jason, and we'll go from there.
Hi, all. My name is Aria. I hopefully know a few of you. So I actually work at Microsoft focusing on Windows Update Management, especially for commercial customers. So whether you use Windows Update for Business or Windows Server Update Service, or test out updates with the Windows Insider Program for Business, those are some of the realms where I love to talk about. Jason.
Yeah, hi. So I work on the Intune products team, actually kind of a sister team to Intune product, and I'm targeted or tasked with ensuring customer satisfaction, or actually making sure that Intune meets the needs of our customers. So I work day to day with customers. I answer questions pretty regularly, and happy to field whatever folks have out there.
Perfect. Oh, there we go. I was going to say, we can go over to Christian. Go ahead.
Keep it horizontal. Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm Christian Montoya. I am a product manager on the Windows 365 team. I've also been leading the Windows 365 Ask Microsoft Anythings. So yeah, if you have any questions on enterprise, business, the new government offering, the announcement for shift workers, hopefully I can answer all those questions. And if not, we'll get the right people on to answer those afterwards. So thanks.
And I'm Sean. I am a product manager in our commercial experience engineering teams. I actually work with our scale teams that help ensure that we're doing the right things to help customers adopt our services. So anything in that Windows management space, making sure that we've got the right resources for you, the right teams in place, things like FastTrack to help you get where you need to go.
And David.
Yeah, hello everyone. I am David Geyer, and I am the product manager for Windows Update for Business in Intune. So bringing all these great features, whether using MDM or Windows Update for Business deployment service into Intune, and the reporting that goes along with that. And so we've been working that journey for a while, got a little bit more to go, and really excited to really try to make Intune the place for managing your Windows updates.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so looking forward to answering all your questions. We had so many great questions. We've watched people follow us from session to session to session, asking us questions. So hopefully you're with us today, and you know who I'm talking about, because in the AMAs I posted, I've called you out and thanked you personally. But Christian, I'm going to start with you, because a question came in yesterday into one of the AMAs, and I think I saw, from what I noticed during the AMA, I think it was basically half answered. You had mentioned something just a second ago about if we have questions about shift workers, and somebody asked in the AMA, in the text part of the AMA, what do we mean when we talk about shift workers? What does the term shift worker mean to Microsoft? Does it mean someone that is hybrid? We use hybrid a lot, but the question came up saying, when you say shift worker, do you mean someone that works from home? Do you mean someone that works hybrid? So when you talk about shift worker, what exactly are you talking about?
Yeah, so in terms of Windows 365, the new offering we're catering for shift workers, we're thinking about folks that may not need their desktop 24/7. They're not going to be going home and just checking their email, connecting to the cloud PC, checking their email at night. It's mostly they show up to their site. They have specific apps, or maybe it's even a call center. they have their tasks for a specific shift of like 8 hours, and then they log off, they leave, and then really that station or clinic, if you're talking about healthcare, is someone else comes in for their shift. So we're thinking of a specific like 8-hour intervals where people are alternating and using work and don't need to connect outside of that 8 hours.
So it's more of a licensing play, as opposed to a technical.
Yeah, it's more of a licensing. It's just making sure that we're trying to provide and try to be flexible and provide this offering where if you know that users aren't going to be using 24/7, checking on the weekends, that there's an alternate option for you, and you would have a better way to deploy Windows 365 for your users.
That's perfect. Thanks so much. We did get a question from Leaf, and I'm going to start with, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Leaf. I'm going to start with Sean on this one. If I don't know anything about Intune, I'm brand new, I'm using Configuration Manager or even something else, I don't know anything about Intune, where do I start? And I have coworkers that love group policy. They've been using it for 22 years, and they work for us. Where do I start with Intune, and how do I get them off of on-premises group policy management?
Yeah, interesting question. So, Intune really extends the capabilities of management to the cloud. And so it's not really an all or nothing on whether you're using on-prem or the cloud. So when you get started, you don't have to do everything in the cloud right away. But, when you think of having better reach for hybrid work and being able to touch those devices that are outside the firewalls, no matter where they live, it's a great way to extend that reach that you have to gain some new capabilities, like the ability to wipe a device. So there's a lot of benefits to making that cloud attachment, in addition to getting better visibility onto those devices with things like analytics. So I would look at, for existing devices, you kind of start with that co-management plane, get yourself cloud attached so you get the visibility onto those devices. You don't necessarily have to move all your policies right away for those existing devices, and kind of work your way gradually towards being able to start moving policies and going more cloud native on those configurations. But you can move policies to the cloud for things like updating. That's a great first place to start, where it makes a lot of sense to do that, especially in a hybrid world. And again, getting that reach out there, it's a simple thing to start moving things like conditional access policies as well, and getting the ability to kind of create that zero trust framework and protect those devices. Those are the places I would start when you think about moving to the cloud. Tackling all of the policies, we do have good parity between what we can do in the cloud and what we can do on-prem. For new devices, it might make a lot of sense to look at doing all policies from the cloud right away on an Azure AD only join device, whereas on existing devices, you kind of move what you can, or you move what you need to give you the capabilities you have, and kind of prepare you for when you do device refreshes in the future. But I would look at probably getting analytics and getting updating as two of the first things I would move over, outside of doing things like conditional access for helping you protect your environments.
Thanks, Sean. And because you mentioned updating, and I can see, Aria glowing as you say, move your updates to the cloud. Aria, do you have any comments on that? Do you want to continue?
I think Sean covered it pretty perfectly. And I think David and I would both agree with everything he said. It's not an all or nothing. Move it when you're ready. If it works for new devices, move them over. And to the people who love group policy, remind them that, everything in time forms into something better. And there's a lot you can do with CSPs that you can't do with group policies. And so
the CSP actually provides a better experience, I think, when you go to log into the machine too. You get a faster login experience for the person coming into the desktop. So there's a lot of benefits to moving in that direction as well, from an experience perspective of the person that's actually using the device.
Thanks, Aria and Sean, and thanks, Lee, for the great question. In terms of getting started, I would just get started on Microsoft Docs pages, our Learn pages for Microsoft Intune, which I'm pretty sure are probably like learn.microsoft.com/Intune. I would have to double check on that, but we'll put that link at Intune Docs. There we go. We got another question from David, and I'm going to come to Jason for this one, because it's a Store for Business question, which is, some of you may know that I've talked a lot about Store for Business, and Jason talks a lot about Store for Business. So Jason, question from David. With the Windows Store for Business replacement, Winget, I have two queries. One, does installing an application using Winget keep it up to date automatically, like a store app would be kept up to date automatically? And what about paid apps? How do we handle those with Winget?
Yeah, so the first thing to point out here is there's really kind of two different things to talk about. We have Winget itself, which is part of the Windows Package Manager ecosystem. And then we have Intune's integration with Winget. The stories are slightly different, but at the end of the day, Intune is just going to leverage everything that is in Winget. So Winget core by itself, can it update applications? Yes. Will the Intune integration with Winget ultimately be able to do that? Yes. Our initial release won't have that complete functionality in there, but we are working towards that because third-party application update management is really high on our priorities right now to get that out. We know that that's been a gap for a while, that folks have had to rely on other third parties to get that done. And so we really want to close that gap. No timelines, no commitments, anything like that, but that is something that's super high on our priority list right now. So basic answer is yes. The capabilities are there, and we do intend to implement those as full as or as rich as possible to enable administrators to have control over that. The second question about purchasing apps, this comes up a lot. I don't remember the exact time frame. I always say it was about 18 months ago. We got rid of paid apps from the store for business and the store for education completely. This was mostly based upon telemetry. We just didn't have folks using it. We know that there are some folks who did use it, right? We know there's a couple of things like Minecraft for Education that was super popular out there to actually purchase that way. But because of such a low usage, we made a business decision that this just doesn't make sense for us to continue to maintain. And so we did that. We made that explicit decision. We're not going to do that. So now it's incumbent upon each vendor or each application publisher to provide you with a way to do that. So I called out Minecraft for Education specifically because clearly that's a Microsoft thing. There's a separate SKU for that. I don't know the exact details. I'm not part of that team. So definitely contact your account team. They should have details on exactly how you can go about doing that. I did actually go out yesterday, though, based on a question somewhere. And if you go to the Minecraft for Education page, there is a handful of links there on how to purchase Minecraft. So you should be able to get all the information there. And if not, like I said, definitely contact your account team.
Thanks. And to follow up on that, other common paid apps are like the HAIC extension, which are available other ways. So the Microsoft apps we've made available either through your VLSC or an account team or the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, just some other way. And again, as Jason said, contact your vendors, and then you can still deploy them using Intune. You can deploy them as LOB apps or as Win32 apps, and then you can use Company Portal on the endpoints and still pull them down. It's just licensing outside of Intune. I saw that we had, and for those of you that have been with us most of the week, you know, we did have a store session in Technical Takeoff earlier this week. And we can put that link back up there. It was up there a couple of minutes ago, but if you missed it, we can put that back up there and you can rewatch that session as well. And then we got a question so thanks, Jason, for that. And again, thanks so much, David, for that question. We got a question from Greg. We're already using Intune to manage update rings, feature update profiles, intelligent rollouts. Are there any common situations where we would use something like Graph API as well? And Ari, I know that you did a Graph session yesterday. So maybe you want to start tackling that one, and then we can maybe go to David as well.
I'll let David go since I think he's gonna. I think both of us have talked a lot about this, so I think that David has the perfect answer for that.
No pressure. So
No
there are
pressure.
really two Graph APIs that you could be asking about here. So Intune has a Graph API. And so I don't know of any common scenarios, but if you were looking to do some automation on top of Intune, that Graph API could be very useful for that. The other Graph API, since we're talking about Windows updates, is the Windows Update for Business Deployment Service Graph API. That API is going to be very useful for preview features. A lot of features that Deployment Service is going to be bringing will be first previewed on the Graph API and will allow you to start to play with those technologies. And in Intune, we should be doing a good job of bringing capabilities that come to that Graph API into Intune reasonably quickly within a quarter or so. But there may be occasionally some features that are not always available in Intune that are available in the Graph API. Those should be just a few. But if you have a need for those, that could be a possibility. One thing that I'll caution about is that if you use the WoofBDS Graph API, those changes, keep those separate from Intune policies. So even though Intune uses the deployment service in the back end for feature updates and expedite updates and the driver updates that we're working on today in private preview, they're different sets of policies, if you will, back in the deployment service, and they don't cross lines very well. And so changes in one may not necessarily be reflected in the other correctly. So just avoid that, and then you'll be fine.
Okay, just avoid that. You'll be fine. Yeah. And we did just publish a blog on that, and I just saw that link up there as well. So you can rewind a little bit to get there. It was aka.ms WoofB plus graph, I believe. But that link was just up there. And keep the questions coming. Because this page doesn't have a lot of questions coming in just yet, we're actually pulling questions from a lot of different areas. So our community Maven is bringing us questions to ask as well. So we got this question that came in from Anthony. And it's maybe Jason or Sean can talk to this. Is Intune free? Is this a free service that we're offering to help enterprises with their Windows and mobile updates and CSPs and security? Is Intune free? I've never used it before. And again, this goes back to the first question, where do I get started? But is it free? How do we take care of that?
Yeah, I guess I can hop in real quick. John, you can jump in afterwards as well. Yeah, at this time, no, Intune itself is not free. Intune is a paid subscription service similar to some of our other paid subscription service, our online services. There are various ways of bundling Intune with other services, though. So if you're already paying for Windows licensing, if you're already paying for M365 apps licensing, which used to be Office 365 licensing, if you're paying for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, right? A lot of our different services, we always have additional bundles for value, right? And as you bundle things together, that value or the ROI on that bundle goes down dramatically, and you can start taking advantage of the synergy between those services as well. So bottom line, no, not free, but in a lot of cases, a lot of folks are already paying for it. So that's another thing that we do find once we start talking to customers, is that they already have the license. They just don't realize that they have the license. And so it's just a matter of implementing. Now, there are free trials, right? So you can sign up for, and I don't know what the initial trial is, probably 30 days. So you can go out and try it to your heart's content, right? Play around, do whatever you need to do to prove it out to yourself, and then engage your account team, engage other resources so that you can make sure that it's right for you.
That's a great answer. And I love the bundling option, right? Whether you're using Azure AD already, if you're using something like Office or Microsoft 365, Intune is not free, but it's included in what you're already paying for.
Joe, you mentioned again the getting started part of that. So if you are licensed for our cloud services or like an M365 license, for example, for customers with 150 or more licenses, they do qualify for FastTrack services, which gives you help adopting. So if you haven't gotten started yet with Intune or with any of the things that we've mentioned here, or just want somebody to help, kind of give you some guidance on deploying and managing Windows, for example, or even getting to your Win 11 updates. For those who qualify, you can take advantage of those FastTrack services.
And again, that's an included service as well. That's not a separately licensed, separately paid for service, correct?
Yeah, correct. That's part of that license that you already have.
That's perfect. We have a question that came in from Charles. So again, thank you, Anthony, for that question on getting started with Intune and things like that. We really appreciate that. And a question came in from Charles, and this sort of goes back to something that you had mentioned, Jason, how Winget's going to take advantage of the processes and features already included in Windows, for example. And this question is about the limitations that AAD may bring in. So Charles is asking, much of the slowness and performance issues with targeting are due to Azure AD limitations, ESP, which is the enrollment status page, and autopilot, dynamic group limitations. Besides for filters, are there any plans to improve Intune's capabilities by moving away from those AAD limitations?
Yeah, so first to acknowledge, we clearly have dependencies on other services like AAD. There are other backend Azure services. We, clearly a very Azure-centric service, and so we are heavily dependent upon what Azure actually provides for us. We made a design decision, I don't know, when was it, 6, 7 years ago, to get rid of our own grouping and targeting mechanisms, right, and start relying on the AAD mechanisms for a lot of different reasons, right? Probably way too many to go into here. And so there are implications with that. And so we have to make sure that we account for those things. So the core of the question there is, are there plans to improve that? Yeah, absolutely, right? We're looking at a lot of things. We're working with a lot of different customers. So my team specifically, I didn't call this out explicitly, but my team is called the Customer Acceleration Team. And we work with customers pretty much all size, but some really large customers. So if you can think of the largest customers in the world, we're working with them. And so that's something that's clearly concerning of them, right? If you're a smaller shop, this may not impact you as much, but those large customers, it clearly does. And so we need to get this right for everyone. And the large customers are kind of that extreme use case. So the kind of second part of that question is, do we have plans of moving away from those constructs? No. Those constructs we think work really well, at least conceptually. We just need to tweak them, improve them, and make sure that they are performant and give everyone what they need out of them.
Great, thanks for that. I forgot that we did that 6, 7 years ago, and you're about right on the time frame. I totally forgot that we made that effort. We got a question from Nathan. This is going to come back to you, Christian, on that shift worker question we were talking about earlier. On the Windows 365 shift worker licensing topic, can you speak to the pros and cons of using the shift worker license versus maybe a pool of shared VMs?
Yeah, so I think the biggest pro for the shift worker license is that it's still that user's cloud PC. We're not trying to share a single desktop in the cloud across multiple users. That cloud PC is still for that user. We're just managing how many can access, at a given time frame. So that's the benefit of it. And so especially if you already have Windows 365 cloud PCs for other users or other groups in your organization, the management's the exact same in terms of all the features you get, in terms of the point in time restore, the e-discovery of placing a cloud PC under review. You still have all the same management capabilities, all the same reporting. Just this month we had the the cloud PC connectivity reports and the utilization reports. You still get all that richness, just with the flexibility that I know that these workers are on a specific time frame. So that's what I'd say is the biggest pro. I think you can still, if you're trying to give different users access to the same system, then yeah, maybe the Azure Virtual Desktop and what they offer with the pooled model with multi-session, that still may be a consideration. And Azure Virtual Desktop is a good use case for different customers. Mm-hmm. And we even see customers use both Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. So keep those options open. But I think that the biggest pro of the shift worker is that it's still that user's cloud PC, and it's still, you have all the management options that you currently get with Windows 365.
Thanks, Christian. And for the viewing audience, we actually had a session, I want to say on Thursday, on the differences between AVD, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Windows 365. So make sure you go back and check that session out as well to help you answer that question. So thanks for that question, Nathan, and Christian for the answer. And we got a question from Kevin that it seems to be more like a delivery optimization type of question, but because we have the word WFB in there, Windows Update for Business, I'm going to throw that over to David and Aria first. But before I do want to just remind everyone that we also had a delivery optimization AMA on Thursday. So that was aka.ms TTAMA delivery optimization. And the question on reporting did come up during that. So make sure you check that out. But the question reads, again, this is for David and Aria. Thanks, Maven, for putting that link up there. Are there any plans to update the Windows Update for Business schema to include a separation for bytes from peers and bytes from connected cache? Presently, we're not sure how we'd report on the impact we see from delivery optimization peers versus delivery optimization cache host. Do you think that's more of a just delivery optimization, or is there also part, is that question also a WFB question?
So I don't know the answer to that. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to get some help from our friends behind us on the chat that own that area, and I'm sure already have the answer just at the tip of their fingertips.
Yep. Narcisse, Andy, Amy, and Carmen. This one's probably for you guys, since
Hopefully it's a
reporting on
softball.
VO is not our thing.
Yeah, sadly.
It's all right. And again, we have that's why we have all these people behind us helping out answering the questions, and why we had such a wide range of topics over the last 4 days as well. And again, the question on delivery optimization reporting did come up in our AMA yesterday, so make sure you go back and review that one. And we got a question, a user profile with regional characters, like the E with the oblong on top of it. It gets created based on user's identity in Azure AD, and hence it will be created with whatever the name the user has in Azure AD. And this gives us a lot of problems when running apps, especially development. How to avoid this without being forced to have a system locale other than just ENUS, right? We can't have all of our systems ENUS. We're a global company. What happens with those users that do have special characters in their names, and how can we avoid any of these problems? I'm going to toss that one to my entire panel.
I think that one you've stumped us all on, Joe. That one's real Windows specific at that point in time. And I think we're going to have to toss it to a Windows person and someone that's deeper on how we're forming that username from the information that's in AAD. I would say the only thing I really have to say that pops into mind, and this is easy for me to say, which sometimes things are real easy for me to say, they're not really real world, is that's a fragile construct, right? So maybe don't use that construct, but like I said, that's not always your choice. So
hopefully we'll get some people behind us answering that question, and we can always follow up. I'm not sure which platform that question actually came to us in, but we can try to follow up on that as well. And I got a question from Jeffrey, and I think it's an Intune in general, but I can see it coming more in the Windows Update space. Are there maintenance windows in Intune, or will we have maintenance windows in Intune like we have with Configuration Manager?
David, want to arm wrestle for it? Because
actually, I think you have been owning and driving that capability for a lot longer. So why don't you take that? And if there's any questions about where that is in Intune, I could fill that in.
Sweet. So happy to answer that question. So we get this a lot when you're talking about updates. Is everyone who's in the config-man world has been in the config-man world for a while. And you're used to maintenance windows of, hey, I want my devices to update only during this period of time. And when we actually talk about Windows Update for Business or moving to the cloud, we're completely switching the construct. Instead of having maintenance windows, which is I want you to do the update during that time, we have a concept of active hours or intelligently calculated active hours, where we're actually looking at, hey, what's the user's usage pattern? When are they using the device? And we're not going to update during that time. We're only going to restart outside of active hours. And so you can kind of think of these concepts as the inverse of each other. One is only restart during this time, and one is don't restart during this time. And so if you look at the inverse of active hours, that actually essentially is giving you something similar to the maintenance window that you have in Configuration Manager today. And note today, yes, that doesn't apply for installs. It only applies for restarts. And if you care a lot about installs, you can do things like set the scheduled install time for outside of active hours, and then you have everything outside of active hours. Or more generally, you can actually just use it and trust the orchestrator to actually know not to install when the device is being used or is being busy. And for things like knowing when to download and install, so Jason's video doesn't freeze whenever he's doing updates for other products.
So it's a very good point. So thanks for that. And so that's how we handle it with like Windows updates. But how about for app installations or like even for iOS updates and things like that? Sean, Jason, what about for the other platforms besides for Windows and Intune?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think we have anything explicitly in the roadmap today, at least not in the near term, to do that. There are lots of motions around ensuring that apps are on the most current version, or we don't update apps when organizations don't want them to be updated for lots of reasons, right? Line of business apps, you want to make sure they're all on the exact same version. There's lots of kind of version control, and that's what all of these really ultimately come down to, is we want to control when things happen in the way we want them to. And so I'd say keep surfacing that feedback, specifically the business cases around that feedback, so that we can bring solutions, right? And not just a knob that does one little tweak thing. We want to build the thing that addresses the actual business case here. So keep bringing that feedback so that we have those things to work on. Clearly, there's Intune's a work in progress, just like all of solutions are, right? So we want to make sure that we incorporate as much feedback as we can in that.
I thanks for putting that link up for Intune feedback, and I love the way you worded that. The business case. We get a lot of what I call anecdotal. Someone will say, "Hey, I wish Intune could do this," but they can't really tell us why they need Intune to do this. And having that business case in the Intune feedback really helps with that. So thanks for that question, and thanks for the answer, Aria and Jason. So we got a question from Nolan asking about how to delete all personal Windows devices from Intune. So he writes, Nolan writes, I'm able to filter down to the devices I need, but there are thousands, and it requires me to click on each and every one of them. Is there a bulk delete so I can delete them all at once?
I guess I'll step up and take this one as well. So I am not a graph expert. However, everything that you see in the console, I will say actually 99%, because there are a couple of corner cases, some very unique corner cases, but everything that you see in the console is actually driven via our API set, which is called the Graph API. So if you can see it in the console, you can do it via code and by calling the Graph API, which is a RESTful API that you can get to through any language really that can do anything that's RESTful. So PowerShell is the typical way that most folks do this type of automation, but it's super open-ended, right? It's not limited to PowerShell at all. There is, and I will need to go find the link so that we can post it in the chat there. My team, again, the CAT team, the customer acceleration team, created a whole repository of sample scripts. They're out on GitHub. So I'll go find that and we can post it up. And I want to say that I would bet that there is probably sample code in there for doing that. At the end of the day, though, right, anything and everything you see in the console, really, you can do this way. And there's some novel ways of actually finding out the exact RESTful URL that you need to use. The developer tools in your browser or your friend is really what that comes down to.
The Graph Explorer is a great tool for testing out a query, making sure you got what you want before you stick it into your PowerShell.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's also fun is running the event in the Intune Admin Center while you have the F12 developer tools open in Edge, and you can watch the graph actually get called, and that's always fun to watch and a good learning.
And that's exactly what I was alluding to, right? Is that you can do that, right? Because it is just the browser calling those graph APIs, so you can see everything that's there. Like I said, there's a couple of small corner cases that I won't get into, but those are typically things that most people aren't doing. So
we're gonna come back to a shared device question from Tony. What things do we have to pay attention to for shared machines? For example, for a laptop used by the morning shift worker or evening shift worker, I'm going to assume that this specific question is not Windows 365 related, but I think Windows 365 can play a good solution into this as well. So I'll let Christian give his thoughts. But for other, for physical devices that are used by multiple people, what are some things that we should really pay attention to?
Yeah,
I actually see this come into play with students all the time, right? You go to a school and there's multiple students sitting at a desk, and they're actually physical machines, not laptops. But go ahead.
Yeah. Just from the Windows 365 side, I think the nice thing about it is you can have minimal policies on that physical, local device, since all the cloud PCs are a user's own cloud PC. So that's my only input. I am no Intune expert. I'm relying on everyone else to jump in.
But it's a good point, right? So if you do have these physical devices that will be logged on by multiple people, get them a cloud PC. Let them use the physical device to connect to the cloud PC, and then they can use the cloud PC instead of saving things locally. Exactly. But Sean, what are some other things that you see like some people say to you, I want to move from in the past Windows 7 to Windows 10 and now Windows 10 to Windows 11, and I have hundreds of user profiles, or I have all of these things. These are devices that have been shared by multiple users over time. What are some other things to look out for, and how can we clean that stuff up?
My short list for shared PCs, is really making sure the policies you're putting on there, get everything you can at the device level, versus having lots of things happening at user levels when you have a lot of switching. You have to be cognizant of the fact if you're trying to use Windows Hello, you've got limitations on how many people you can put on that same machine. Aria brought up updating earlier and that experience. So if you're looking at active hours versus non-active and it's a shared device 24/7, you really don't have any inactive hours on that device anymore. So you have to deal with that, which actually is a great use case for Windows 365, because at that point, I got my shift, I use it, it'll get updated, I'll come back and get the newer version. So there's a huge plus there for looking at that technology instead. Migrating user profiles around when you're replacing that hardware also gets to be a challenge. So I kind of keep those on my short planning list of things you have to account for when you've got those shared scenarios. Jason may have a few others.
Nope, I think you covered it pretty well.
I hear some clicking, clacking as someone on our side, either behind me or on screen, is taking some notes. So thank you for letting me know that you're taking some notes here. We're all learning a little bit here. So we have a question here from Ryan, going back to the active hours question. So Ari, I'm going to throw this over to you and let maybe David expand on that if he needs to. But we encourage users to shut off our computers when not working, or at the very least, let them sleep. Doesn't active hours setting ensure computers will never get updated until the deadline hits? I haven't confirmed this with testing yet, because all Windows Update for Business settings to grok their functionality is fairly time consuming. A blog with pictures and clear explanations of settings would help. But let's go back to the active hours question, the beginning of that. What happens if we do shut off our machines every night?
Yeah, great question. I'll actually answer both, but I'll start with the active hours question. So actually, if your device is plugged in and it just goes to sleep, that's totally fine. The device will actually wake up and actually try to both install and restart, committing the update. And so that way you're actually able to update overnight when the end user's away. And in fact, that's our golden path. So when we talk about the best experience based on all of the data of updating the billions of consumer devices, the best experiences we find are those where the device restarts overnight when the end user isn't present. And so that's actually the desired behavior. Great, let it go to sleep, leave it plugged in, it'll update for you, and it will all be great. You'll come back to an up-to-date device. Now, the way the deadline works is simply saying, hey, we're going to force it after a certain period of time. Unless you set the don't automatically try and restart my device, it will automatically try every single night, and hopefully it's successful. And you'll see it's successful most of the time. But if it's not, because they're doing a hard shutdown every single night, well, one, interesting choice. I don't really think you need to be shutting down the device every single night. Every once in a while is really good, but every night's you do you. But in that case, you're completely correct. They'll see notifications to schedule the install, and they can then schedule it during the day or schedule it to restart during a day when they're actually present or over lunch or whenever works for them. And eventually, they'll actually be forced to update if they haven't been successful doing that. And you'll see this in your validation and your testing as well. The other thing I would say is I totally get it. Windows Update policies can be confusing. We actually had tons of different group policies and CSPs. With Windows 11, we actually deprecated over 40% of the Windows Update policy set. In fact, we actually will show you a policy, if you're using the updated Windows 11 GP/ADMX templates, you'll see that there's now a folder structure, and a bunch of the policies will move to legacy policies. You can use this ADMX template to manage Windows 10 devices as well as Windows 11. And if you're using CSPs, even better. Ideally, your management tools are only using policies that are recommended and supported. But if you're still not sure and you want an easy list, we actually wrote a blog on exactly which policies you should set and why for different scenarios, whether that's one-to-one, shared devices, what if you're using Windows 365 or not, and kiosks and many more other device types. So I'd highly recommend looking at that. We are constantly working on a ton of different content, blogs, videos, and docs to give you guidance here. and to make this as simple as possible. And if you want to make it even simpler, great. Look at auto patch. It'll actually remove the need for you to know anything about the policies, enroll your device, and auto patch will then set these policies on your behalf. And so those are just some options I recommend you look into.
Auto patch is a great solution, and we had an AMA on that yesterday as well. So aka.ms TTAMA Windows Auto Patch. I think it was Windows Auto Patch. But I'm gonna ask another side of that question. What about those devices that never reboot? We reboot our devices once a month after we get our updates. What happens if I start pushing out, to my end users? I start pushing out things like drivers and firmware. I think, David, you mentioned that earlier. Drivers and firmware 1 week, but Windows updates a different week. And now they have to reboot their machines twice. And then applications require a reboot. Now they have to reboot their machines 3 times. What are we doing to control that number of reboots?
Yeah, that's a great question. So luckily, not all products require a reboot. That's at least the first bright side. The second thing that we're doing is saying, hey, how can we actually do a better job of 2 sides? One side is with the Windows Update for Business deployment service and the Intune manifest of such. We're really doing a lot of work to enable you, the IT admin, to control which updates are offered when. Ideally, if you're doing this well, you're then saying, hey, these updates are all offered around a similar time. Secondarily, since we know, hey, that's not enough, and we have a lot of devices that aren't managed, we're doing a ton of work on the orchestration side of things to actually orchestrate these updates and make sure that we're holding them for reboots or we're doing the installations in ways and times that'll be the least disruptive to the end user and the times that are most aware of the different updates. And while I don't have a timeline to give you about when all updates on Microsoft will be on Windows will be fixed and will only cause 1 reboot a month or less, I can tell you that that is something we care deeply about and are actively working on. And of course, if you have feedback or business cases around wanting more apps and products to update seamlessly with Windows updates and have fewer reboots, again, please give us that feedback. I'm always looking for more information on what in the product is the highest priority to fix when and how we can make the most improvements to make your experience the best it can be.
One of the things I love that we've done with Windows Update, and we're going to leave Windows Update in a minute after my comment, is we tell you how long it's going to take to update your machine. It's typically 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. I saw on Twitter today, someone I follow was updating a different platform, and it said 11 hours, 55 minutes for his update. And I had to chuckle because even though Windows may have been that at one point in time, but it's not anymore. Literally, it's 3 to 5 minutes. A feature update might be a little bit longer, but not 11 hours and 55 minutes. All right, so we got a question for Christian from Nathan about something that was announced some time ago. Could the Windows 365 sign-on directly from the Windows 11 logon screen be seen as kind of Microsoft's answer to a thin client?
That's a great question. I know that, I think we had this sort of announce of features to come with really rich integration between Windows 11 and Windows 365. It being a replacement or a Microsoft option for a thin client. I don't know if we have like we're going to do this. Obviously, we're always investigating. The closest thing that we think of is almost like a kiosk device. We want one of our goals is to make sure that you can always be productive on any device. And so being able to boot and launch Windows, your cloud PC straight from the login kind of helps accelerate that, because then it really doesn't matter what local OS version you're using. So I think for the direct question of, is it our option of a thin client? I think in order to make that definition, we'd have to, be doing something very specific. We do have partners that have these, very cheap, like, Dell Wise terminals, et cetera. Until we do something like that, I would say no, but we just want to make it easier for you to have that experience and also to configure it, similar to maybe how you deliver kiosks.
That's a great way to answer that. And someone asked that yesterday, and actually I've seen it a couple of times this week, where people have asked, is Microsoft going to have a thin client now for Windows 365? And it's not just Surface creating a thin client. I mean, all OEMs can do whatever they want with Windows 365. It just needs a Windows 365 type of solution to be embedded into that device.
Exactly. Yeah.
And whether you call it a thin client or however you refer to it, I think the question really is, can I open up a laptop, sign in, and connect directly to a Windows 365 client? I think that's ultimately the question, whether we call it a thin client or not.
Yeah, and it's really funny because I before working on the Windows 365 team, I did work on the Azure Virtual Desktop team, so I have a very, very like keen fondness for all of these remoting solutions. And for me, it's like, if as soon as you say thin client, I think VDI. I'm like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I understand that this is how you've had to do it whenever you had to have remoting solutions. But we're with Windows 365, we're trying to get away from that. You don't have to think about VDI because you don't have to manage every little thing if it's Windows 365. So yeah, it's thin client. I'm like, oh, I feel a little tingle.
Yep, totally get that. We have about 5 minutes left, and I probably have time for one or two more questions. We have one question that came in on kiosk mode, so I know two people I'm looking at that might be able to help with this one. Kiosk mode configuration in Intune is pretty limited. I kind of paraphrased. It's pretty limited. This is especially true if you want to do auto login with AAD, Azure AD credentials. We need this to use single sign-on for applications, either on-prem or software as a service, SaaS apps. We're passwordless environment, so user cannot just enter their credentials. This is preventing us from fully moving to Intune. Are there plans to enable more functionality in kiosk devices? And I know the short answer to that is yes, but the long answer, I'm going to start with Jason and move over to Sean for that one.
Unfortunately, I know very little about kiosks other than what they are and what Christian was just talking about with them. So, yeah, I mean, I know there's things in the work stream. My only potential comment here is this isn't Intune specific, because Intune's not the thing that's enabling the kiosk. And this sounds more like an AAD identity thing, but that doesn't make it not a thing. So, yeah, maybe Sean has some more info, but
I kind of agree with what Jason said. I think it's not as much of an Intune thing as maybe a Windows thing or an AAD thing. So we are doing a lot of work around kiosks. There's a lot of work happening within Windows 11 to enhance what we have from a kiosk perspective. I heard two things in there though. When you sign into a kiosk, typically you're signing in under that kiosk identity, and then I heard single sign-on access and users enter credentials. Typically, that's got to be handled at the app level within a kiosk. If you want, say, Joe to use a kiosk and actually sign in as Joe to that app, then he's going to have to enter that somehow. I've seen some pretty creative solutions where you're able to do things like, let him swipe his badge and grab something off of there to get him in or whatever. But it seems like that's an app level thing that would have to take care of that authentication, not so much the kiosk itself.
I was thinking the same thing as I was reading it. I'm thinking, well, I mean, I can have a local user account that logged into the kiosk, then use Edge to connect to that SaaS application. There can't be a single sign-on from the local user account on the kiosk. It would have to be some sort of an Azure AD account. As you said, maybe you're swiping your badge, maybe it's even a hello type of thing, but at the app level, more likely.
Yeah, I think they're internal users too. Maybe there's a potential to do something like you sign in, like you said, you launch the browser. Maybe you could use a FIDO key to get to those apps, so you don't have to type anything in. So, not really sure, what your scenario is or what's possible in there, but I would look at things like that.
Yeah, I was going to call out real quick that based on what you're talking about, I know there is a solution in the U.S. medical industry that sounds real similar, right? With the card swiping. Nursing stations is the prime example where it's already logged in, but of course nurses, right? They don't want to be typing credentials, and they're all sharing those nursing stations. So it's not like you want them logging in, logging out of Windows. And so the solution from the third party, they literally take their badge, they swipe, it logs them all into the apps, and it doesn't actually log them in and out of Windows, but it's at the app level, right? And so that kind of sounds like what this is, but we need a lot more. We need to dig in a little bit more to really discover.
So we have about probably 40 seconds left. So Paul, we see a question. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to read it today, but we will be answering that right on the tech community. So, look for an answer there within the next, I don't know, probably 5 minutes. It could be next day or so, but it will be really soon. So I'd like to just, ask you all, again, we're going to start with Aria, Jason, Christian, Sean, David, just any final thoughts for our audience today?
I think that my final thought is, hey, Paul, I'll go answer your question. There's tons of easy stuff you can do for servers to get them over to WolfBee.
Cool. Thanks, Aria.
My final thought would be, keep in mind for customers who qualify, we do have the FastTrack services to get help with Intune, with Windows 11 updates, or any of those things. We also have our Aperture services for anything you might find in a compatibility space across Windows, Office, Edge, any of our first-party apps. So.
Yeah, I was going to call out as, it sometimes sounds like we have all the answers. Clearly we were, didn't have them all today necessarily. But reality is it's a journey, right? It's always a journey because things are always evolving as far as the business goes, as far as the technology goes, as far as what we offer. And we want to hear about those things that, we don't have right, that we've missed, that we, don't know about, haven't gotten to. We want to know because we want to make this and Intune, Windows, Office, etc. We want to know how to make those things better to serve your business and to serve your users. So please always just let us know when we're falling down.
I was going to say, just like we have the ak.ms/Intune feedback, we also have ak.ms/W365 feedback. We want to hear from you. We had a lot of exciting announcements from Ignite and hopefully some good skill trainings this week. So just stay on the lookout and please provide feedback.
And David, anything final from you?
Yeah, no, I really like what Jason was, the way Jason put it about it's a journey. And we're very much on a journey in the Windows Update space for modernizing, bringing better capabilities to the cloud, which devices are getting which updates and when. The reboot management is definitely something that's on that path, on that journey that we're thinking about. There's a lot of different opportunities there. Reporting is a key area that this movement to the cloud is really going to help us out with, providing more detail and better reports. I've got this long list of ideas of things that we want to implement, but we've got to do things in an order that makes sense and build things up. So stick with us. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for the questions. Thank you for using our products and providing the feedback that makes the work we do fun, and hopefully makes the work that you do easier, better, and just a better experience for all your end users as well.
I think that's the most important thing is your feedback matters. That's why we have Intune feedback, Win365 feedback, or W365 feedback, and why we put this together this week. And we have got hundreds of questions. It's just to help, keep providing our feedback, whatever you need to do, whether it's finding us on Twitter, finding us on the feedback pages, keep providing that feedback because you're making our products better. And as David said, you're making us have fun at work and making our work matter. So thank you so much. I want to thank the people behind me here that are answering all your questions. I want to thank the people in front of me that have been answering, that are less camera shy, that actually came on camera to do this. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, and as you go on to holiday season and FY23 and all that stuff. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a great time. Bye.